Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on redefining Europe's place in the world, which we couldn't really have a more kind of appropriate session for today. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has just been speaking downstairs and talked about the need for a new form of European independence. I'm Gideon Rachman. I'm Chief Foreign Affairs Commentator for the Financial Times, and I'm delighted to have a fantastic panel to discuss this very topic. Just moving from left to right, on my immediate left is the Prime Minister of Belgium, Bart de Wever. Then we have the CEO of ABN AMRO, Marguerite Bérard. Then we have the President of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda. Then we have the co-founder, Chief Executive Officer of Mistral AI, Arthur Mensch. And on the far left, we have Andrej Plenković, the Prime Minister of Croatia. So, where do we start? Why don't I start with you, President Nausėda? Before we get to the man who's going to dominate attention tomorrow, Donald Trump, we shouldn't forget there is a major war going on in Europe. You're right up against it, with Belarus as your neighbor and Russia as your near neighbor. And yet there is talk of a peace plan now. Do you have any real hope that this plan can be made to work for Ukraine?
I am, and probably I will be on the skeptical side of people, because I know Russia, our country knows Russia very well. And as far as Ukrainians talk diplomatic language, and we are now in the process of elaboration of this peace plan, 20 points peace plan, but on the other hand, Russians talk with missiles. Probably it's too early to conclude that Russians are ready to take this plan and to start to negotiate. I think they want to buy more time to attack Ukraine and first of all to attack the critical infrastructure of Ukraine, making the life of ordinary people impossible, even in capital, in Kiev. And then maybe at the later stage, they will sit down and they will talk about the peace. But I think some issues of this 20 points peace plan, or some elements of them, are not acceptable for Russians. And I think this is about the matter of territorial concessions from the side of Ukraine. I think Russians require the whole region of Donbass. And also the strength of Ukrainian army, 800,000 soldiers on the ground, is also not acceptable for Russians. We will see what will happen, but I would like to move away or to push away the illusion that if the peace deal will be done, I hope that it will be sooner or later, Russia will refuse to have imperialistic ambitions. I don't see any signals that it might happen, because the Kremlin's regime is as it is, and even the change of Kremlin's regime probably will not mean the radical changes in the policy of Russia, because from time to time I hear what the Russian opposition leaders are talking about. Actually, they are presenting the same ideas, and those ideas are, first of all, expansionist policy of Russia. They, like the European Union, they are talking about enlargement, but we are talking about civilized enlargement, and they are talking about enlargement by using the force and by using the guns.
Okay. Well, very sobering. Thank you very much for that introductory thought. Prime Minister de Wever, of course, Europe's under pressure from two sides. Russia, but also we have Donald Trump arriving tomorrow, demanding Greenland part of a European Union country.
I noticed.
Yeah. So the question the people keep asking me in the corridors, do you think Europe will stay united? A lot of people saying, Europe's going to fold in the end. That's what they do. Europe won't be able to push back. How confident are you that Europe can, as von der Leyen said, stay united, proportional, and respond?
It's a very good question, actually. I wonder about this myself. We're under a lot of pressure. We're 27 countries. And if you're under pressure, two things can happen. If you have outside pressure, you can come together or you can explode in any possible direction. And I think Europe is at a crossroads where it has to decide. Until now, We tried to appease the new president in the White House. We were very lenient also with the tariffs. We were lenient, hoping to get his support for the Ukraine war. We are in a very bad position at the moment. We're dependent on the United States, so we chose to be lenient. But now so many red lines are being crossed that you have the choice between your self-respect. Being a happy vassal is one thing, being a miserable slave is something else. If you back down now, you're going to lose your dignity. And that's probably the most precious thing you can have in a democracy. It's your dignity. So we should unite, and we should say to Donald Trump, I'm going to meet him tomorrow. The meeting was fixed before the Greenland issue. So
Looking forward to it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward. The king will accompany me on the... I'm looking at the queen who's sitting in the front row. Our king will accompany me at the meeting, but it will have a different character than we had planned. It will probably be the message that we have to send. You're crossing red lines here. We either stand together or we will stand divided. And if we are divided, there is the end of an era of 80 years of Atlantism is really drawing to a close. And, you know, as Gramsci said, if the old is dying and the new is not yet born, you live in a time of monsters. Yeah. And it's up to him to decide if he wants to be a monster, yes or no.
Very good. Before I move on to Prime Minister Plenković, I just wanted to ask you about the aftermath of the whole Euroclear argument, which you were absolutely in the centre of. And I think you must have been reasonably happy, if not with the argument, with the outcome. Mm-hmm. But some people will say, well, that whole episode just told you about Europe's problems. Here's Europe, we say we're going to do this big thing, and then we all sit around arguing, and then we do a little thing, and everybody says, oh, look, they can't get it together.
I'm going to try to be a little bit optimistic. Otherwise, it's going to be a very depressing session here. At the end of the day, we decided to aid Ukraine with 90 billion euros. And that was the thing we had to do, keep Ukraine in the fight, because the United States is no longer supporting them. They're on their own. It's not looking good. Was Europe able to say, we're going to do whatever it takes to keep you in the fight? And at the end, we did. The way in which we did it, the discussions we had, maybe are not an example of the best governance you can imagine, but at the end of the day, there was a result. But of course, we are in a bad position. We didn't do our homework. We stayed believing in the United West, but the writing was already on the wall when Obama said, I'm the first Pacific president, the burden shift from the United States towards China. We chose to ignore it and to keep enjoying the peace dividend. We didn't rearm, we didn't strengthen ourselves. Now we're in a weak position. But I think, having said that, that we made a choice to support Ukraine. Only we learned a lesson the hard way with the Euroclear and the reparation loan debate that there is no such thing as free money. There's nothing like the Alibaba cave that opens and you can simply take the gold and get away with it. That was an illusion that existed for a few months at the European table, but I think we managed to put an end to it for the moment.
Okay. Prime Minister Plenković, I'm interested in your take. Again, to quote the President of the Commission, she said, Europe's response will be unflinching, united and proportional. There's a European Council meeting on Thursday night. What kinds of things will Croatia be arguing for that Europe should respond to from these twin challenges, Russia and the United States now?
Yes. First of all, thank you for being here again for 10th season in a row as the Prime Minister of Croatia. My first point is regarding what we were discussing in December in Brussels. I think whatever the outcome was, pending option A, option B, using the Russian Central Bank frozen assets or the loan, the good outcome that we have found 90 billion euros to finance Ukraine for 26 and 27, both functioning of the state, the entire I would say, blood flow of the financial system and also helping Ukraine to defend itself. This was the key political objective. How we got to it was basically a technique. I think the outcome which came out was a little bit more secure when it comes to the legal certainty, and therefore Bart has managed to convince the majority of us that his arguments were fine. When it comes to the two pressures, one coming from Russia with the brutal violation of international law and the aggression against Ukraine after other episodes in the part of Europe, which was formerly a neighborhood, now it's more into the enlargement basket. I mean here, Moldova and Georgia, which do have basically frozen territories. I think that the key aspect is to remain vigorously on the side of the Ukrainians and on the side of freedom, democracy, and international law. This is what we stand for. This is why we have supported so strongly Ukraine over the past 4 years. I think many of us will be heading to Kyiv on the 24th of February to extend further support. And I think we should a little bit revisit what we discussed a few days ago, and that is the peace plan. Now, the Greenland has taken us, the entire debate, into a different direction, a bit odd, unexpected, but these are the realities of a changing global order. We are, as we have seen recently, in the situation where the international organizations, international law, global governance, as we knew it, is changing so rapidly that we need to position ourselves. I think the only safe way for the European Union to remain an actor is to try to be as united as possible. Not necessarily all the governments are singing the same tune. And if that is visible from someone who would like to see a little bit more divisions on the EU side, then that will be exactly the weak spot and the weak link which will be emphasized. So I guess that this meeting on Thursday night is supposed to strengthen our position on supporting Denmark, obviously. That is a very logical way to do it, but also maintaining sensible, reasonable, expected, good transatlantic ties with the United States. I mean, for all of us, despite all the, let's say, noise in the communications channel, I mean, United States is an ally and a friend. I don't know anybody among 27 who has altered that position. So we need to talk to each other more, maybe be less abrupt in being faced with fait accompli propositions, but more talking to each other and finding solutions for the global order. This is our position, and this is a line of Croatia that has been very clear for the last 10 years.
Thank you very much. Marguerite, you run a big European bank. And both things, I guess, are important to you. You're European, you're also a banker. How do you navigate these geopolitical waters? I was quite struck that the European Business Roundtable issued a statement saying, okay, it's enough with America, we need to get tough, which is not the normal thing that you expect business people to say. So how do you see it?
You're right. As my accent probably betrays me, I'm French, and at the same time, I live in Amsterdam, running, a Dutch bank. So I would define myself as passionately European. And when I try to think about what are all European values, I would say that this is about the rule of law. This is about human dignity. This is about democracy. This is about also reason and truth. And all these values of cooperation have served us well in the past decades, and helped us build a Europe-free world. Right now, we feel challenges from all fronts. Outside of Europe, with wars, with authoritarian regimes, and also, in fairness, within Europe, with, I would say, added polarization, sometimes the erosion of truth in our internal debate, and sometimes also political instability and fragmentation. And right now, looking at Europe, we sometimes feel, hey, are we a herbivore in a world of carnivores? Because on all fronts, we feel right now under pressure.
Looks a bit like that.
Mm-hmm. It may feel like that. And then the answer is, if we want to defend our values, we need to be strong. And it's not only about, I would say, military or political strength. This is also about economic strength. And this is where, very, humbly as a banker, we feel we can contribute. Because what are banks? The plumbing of the economy, the blood circulating in the economy, making projects possible, financing innovation, financing infrastructure, and taking risk we manage and understand. And this is what we want to do, because we want to be, strong European banks for a strong Europe. that sometimes also lead us to, I would say, question collectively our risk appetite in Europe. Don't get me wrong. I was, at the time of the financial crisis, actually in the public service working at the Élysée, so I got first-hand experience of what goes wrong when the financial sector goes wrong. But I think we have built a very sound financial sector, and now we need to make sure that sometimes, our collective risk appetite is not preventing us from also financing the needed European transitions, be it, energy, defense, mobility, tech and digital, to name a few. Because unfortunately, being conservative in today's world and status quo is not a very, it's not a risk-off position. It is a very dangerous one.
Well, that leads me naturally to Arthur Mensch, because I think one of the reasons for American super confidence and their slight contempt for Europe, maybe slight is an understatement, is the sense that we have fallen way behind in the industries of the future, particularly technology. And indeed, I remember being at a meeting and you passed by and somebody said, there's our only hope. He's the only guy we've got. I don't want to lay too much on you. But how far behind is Europe and what can we do about it?
Well, I think there are a few reasons to be optimistic on that front. If you look at technology is about inflection points, and whenever you have a replatforming of software because you've invented a new technology, you can expect competition to rise again, and you can expect opportunities to rise. And then the question is Europe ready to use those opportunities to catch up? Because effectively, we lost the battle on cloud, and we created a huge dependency to US digital services in Europe. So that's 80% of digital services being imported from the US to Europe, and that's effectively all that amount of value that is coming back to the US used and reinvested in R&D to build further leverage and further dominance. And so this is true, but yet AI is a way to build different software. It's a different kind of infrastructure that you need to build. You need a lot of energy. You need high density energy sites. Europe has plenty of those. You can rebuild the entire public cloud services based on AI technology. And it's actually much less costly to rebuild thanks to artificial intelligence. So suddenly the unit economics of software have changed. And the good thing about Europe is that we have opportunities. We have, again, energy, high supply of energy. We have talented people that can build software quickly. We actually have manufacturing, financial services, those companies that are worldwide competitors, world-class. And those companies are willing to spend on R&D, willing to transform themselves around artificial intelligence. And what we've seen in the last year, and honestly, I think Donald Trump presidency played a role there, is that a lot of these companies and a lot of European states realize that now may be the time to partner with European technology providers to build value together, to make sure that the value created is reinvested in research and development, to further build leverage and get rid of the dependency that we have created for ourselves. And that dependency, the technological dependency, is probably the biggest vector of power of the United States. And if you talk to J.D. Vance, that's exactly how he staged that. So we do need to build that leverage and to make sure that that we use our strength to not fall into what I think is the biggest risk in the coming years for Europe, which is to become a colony in artificial intelligence. In that we may be in a state, if European technology does not achieve its goals, we may be in a state where 95% of digital services and artificial intelligence is imported from the US. And that means that our entire industry is going to run its processes on top of an infrastructure that can be turned off. If the US decides to. That also means that our defense technology and deterrence is going to rely on US technology that can be turned off, and that means deterrence cease to be anything. And eventually that also means something for democracies. And at Mistral we don't really focus on that, we really focus on the two first points. But on the consumer side, if you end up with two US companies that owns access to information and can influence how people think, that means they can actually influence elections, they can influence the regimes wherever they actually are deployed. And so I think we can build leverage on the three things, so defense, economy, and information sovereignty. We work with businesses, enterprises, and states to make sure that we create leverage on the two first. We can do it more. We think Europe could invest more in European technology, procure more European technology, cease to procure US technology, and that would propel us forward. But really, we have reasons to be optimistic, and in a way, we are ceasing to be the frog in the slowly boiling kettle, because we realize that effectively they've built leverage and they're going to use it. So no, a lot of red lines have been crossed, and it means that actions are being taken, and I think we should continue to take them.
Just kind of quick follow-up. I mean, as you say, you run a major business. You must, in the space you're in, work a lot with Americans. You have to.
I mean, we do. Yeah, we do, and we export to America, and we haven't built our differentiation based on sovereign concerns only. We've built an approach to enterprise software, an approach to creation of value in financial services manufacturing that we actually export to the US.
But as a businessman, you know, with responsibility to the people who invested in you, can you do the things that politically you think need to be done, which is, you know, reduce your risk, reduce your exposure to the United States?
We have, in that we have reduced our dependency to hyperscalers, for instance. That's why we moved toward infrastructure. We decided to invest in creating our own servers, in buying our own GPUs, in operating those, and eventually what we are achieving is that we are now a full stack vertically integrated AI cloud provider. That does reduce our dependency to US services, because effectively when we started, we used US cloud services because there was nothing else to train models on. Now we do depend on goods. The good dependency is not going to disappear anytime soon, but the good dependency is much more balanced in that the US actually needs European goods, we need US goods. We'll find a way. On digital services, this is not balanced, and this is a very high risk. And so that's why we decided to build that vertically integrated stack, because we heard from the market, from public sector, from defense, that this was a requirement.
Okay. Marguerite, actually, I'd just like to ask you how all of this applies to the financial sector. I mean, because people are saying, I mean, maybe this trade war will be called off and Donald Trump will change his mind, etc. But if it starts, it'll start spilling over perhaps into banking and into the financial markets. In fact, do you think we're already seeing a reaction in the financial markets to the growing uncertainty?
I would say that, you know, there's one thing markets don't like is you know, uncertainty. And certainly, you know, when there is less cooperation, people start to really become fidgety. And I think there's something interesting that we're observing right now. And if you remember what happened last April when you know, the discussions on tariffs were in full swing, you know, what really put some reasons back in the system was the fact that, you know, markets reacted strongly, and basically the interest rate on the 10-year, you know, US bond started to you know, go through the roof, huh? And the US, you know, have their weaknesses, and one of these weaknesses is, you know, they have enormous amount of debts they need to finance. So at some point, you know, when markets and money markets become fidgety, this is also having an impact. And if I look right now, and it's quite interesting, despite, you know, 3 cuts by the Fed in you know, short-term interest rates, you see that the 10-year yield bond is not you know, following that pace. Huh? Mm-hmm. So right now there is uncertainty, and you see it, you know, spiking. The 10-year right now is at its highest level since September. So markets are sort of bracing for impact right now.
Interesting. President Nausėda, I mean, coming back to the Russia challenge, what's your assessment of the state of the Russian economy, and do you think there is more that Europe can do to pile pressure on?
The information we receive, of course, is not very encouraging for the state of Russian economy, and I think Russian economy is just deteriorating and have had a lot of macroeconomic problems, disbalances, and I think this is a matter of time when they will switch into the stage of stagflation, stagnation and high inflation at the same time. But you know that the specific feature of Russia is that the politicians or dictator can ignore the macroeconomic situation just by putting all the burden to the ordinary people and just pretending to invest more into the defense and ignoring all these imbalances, at least for the time being. So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't put additional pressure on Russia in form of sanctions, and European Union will do this, I am pretty sure. And we have to punish also the close ally of Russia, Belarus, which is actually our neighbor, very close neighbor, 600 kilometers common border with Lithuania. And we are just experiencing almost every day a form of attacks. It might be the illegal migration, it might be metal balloons, the drones coming from Ukraine. And this regime is close ally of Putin and should be sanctioned logically too. So this is the reason why all the time I support the idea of imposing the sanctions on Belarus, because this country is a source of instability in the region. What should Europe do? Of course, Europe should take more responsibilities, not only in the field of economy, but also in the field of military forces. And I see that we made quite significant progress in last months. Much should be done in the future because we are still lagging behind by many means. First of all, we are lagging behind if we compare our military capabilities with Russian capabilities. We are obviously lagging behind if we compare the production capacity. The Russians can produce ammunition, military guns and other military equipment, and Europe has not so much time in order to
That's the question I wanted to ask you, is this time question, because I've heard very different assessments. Some, one senior former European leader said to me, the Russian threat is overdone. They've been fighting for 4 years. They haven't taken Kharkiv, which is 30 miles from their frontier. There's no way they're going to attack Europe. And then there are others like Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, who says, no, this is a very, very dangerous moment. And people in the Baltic states also say, you could take the threat from Russia.
This is not about Baltic states. This time, I think this is not about the Baltic states, because missiles can reach in 5-10 minutes every capital of Europe. This is, by the way, the wording of Mark Rutte too. So we are all affected, because this time Putin wants to challenge the democracy, our rule of law, and all these good things you mentioned. And I think we have to be aware. And why I am talking that after the peace deal, Russia will stay aggressive. You can imagine they produce enormous amounts of guns, ammunition, equipment. And do you think they will leave those goods idle when the peace deal is over? I don't think so, because we know the origin of Russia, we know their ideas, messianism idea, first of all. And I think this is a matter of concern, big concern. And we are able to deal with that matter only together. So this is, for me, the heartbreaking to see the conflict between the United States and Europe, because I'm a strong believer in transatlantic bond.
Yeah.
My country is too.
Yeah, heartbreaking indeed, and also dangerous. And Mr. De Wever, I wanted to ask you about that, because the Prime Minister Plenković said, look, in the end, we all know America's an ally, and this is still our view. But listening to you earlier, you said, talked about the prospect of us becoming unhappy slaves. Do you share that view, that we can take it for granted that the US is an ally of Europe?
Unfortunately not. I would like to confirm that they are an ally, but then they have to behave like an ally. And if you talk about the Russian threat, it's not that great if the West is united, but we are not united, and Putin sees this. The economy of Russia is very weak. Their military threat is not very real unless we are divided. But it's exactly what he sees, that we are divided. When we had the last meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris, the American delegation started their opening statement by saying, we're not here to take a side in the conflict. I found this very shocking because I grew up in the 1980s where the West stood for something, for the sovereignty of the people, for democracy, for freedom. The idea that in a conflict between a tyrant and a democracy, the United States will say, well, we're not going to take sides. In a gathering of the Coalition of the Willing pro-Ukraine, of democratic allied countries saying we're coming here together because one of us is threatened by Russian aggression, we have to support him. They said, we're not here to take sides. We're here to make a deal. Putin sees this. This is his strength, is our division. And of course, if he follows the news and says now a NATO country is threatening another NATO country with military invasion, it will not discourage him to continue his war on Ukraine. It will certainly not discourage the Chinese to choose for an imperialistic agenda. And if the Atlantism would really die, I hope not, but if it dies, globalization will die with it. That's very clear. Yeah. And we cannot stay a herbivore in that world. That's the European lesson we have to learn. We have to wake up, we have to rearm, we have to integrate our market, and we have to weaponize our market, and we have to seek new alliances. I don't think we have to annul the alliance we have, but we have to seek new ones. Mercosur was very useful. We have to do it.
Do we have to tilt towards China a bit?
We have to continue engaging China. China is always a mystery. They could go both ways. They could go full imperialistic. But I think China can also be engaged to evolve towards a win-win situation. But of course, then you also need the United Europe to talk to them, to say what is our win. Because for the moment, it is their win and our lose. In 2007, the numbers don't lie. The European economy was 10 times bigger than China. Now we're equal. In 2007, we were the equal of the United States. Now they're 50% in front of us. The entire difference is the tech sector. We've become totally dependent on technology that we do not own and do not control. That is not how the Chinese did it. They did it differently. We were a little bit naive, and it's time to wake up. We need our own technological platforms to build the prosperity of tomorrow. If not, Trump can do with us, he can play with us. He can make us slaves because we actually are slaves then. And we'll have to take for granted whatever he does. And we've been accustomed to very nice presidents like Obama, and we haven't noticed that the shift in America is not bound to one presidency. It's a structural shift. The face of America has turned to the Pacific. Their backside is turned to the Atlantic. And that will not change after Trump. It's a structural thing. So it's up to us, I think, not to complain about Trump because you say you will get all the attention tomorrow. I can assure you, you already had it today. Yeah. In every conversation, it's Trump, 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 Trump. Okay, that's very nice. And we can complain about Trump, the way he does things, the way he tells things, the humiliation, he lays it on very thick. But that cannot exclude us or that does not exempt you from doing your own homework. And maybe we should focus on that. And then maybe in 5 years, we will say, thank you, Mr. Trump, for waking us up just in time to build a much stronger Europe and a united Europe. It can go either way. Either we unite or either globalization will die and we will be the victim of it.
Yeah. You wanted to say, I want to come to Prime Minister Plenković in a second, but a quick one.
Maybe two remarks on my side. I fully agree with the Prime Minister. One of the striking facts for me, and you know, I went to university in the US. This is a country I deeply feel for. I'm struck by the weakness of US institutions at the moment. Mm-hmm. It is striking. We thought that this was, you know, the strongest democracy with you know, strong checks and balances. You know, right now when I'm talking to American CEOs, many of them accept to say things in private that they don't dare saying in public because they are concerned about potential retortions on their companies. And I'm like, oh my God, is this the US we're talking about? So that's one sort of, you know, fact that we have to digest as well in the way we perceive the US right now. And the other one is, and that may seem as a long time ago, but I think we all read, you know, the paper, the US, you know, the national strategy.
Sure.
that was shared. And the terms in which Europe were described, it's not, it's not a description of an ally or a friend, huh? And so it is.
Yeah. Well,
really
it's
quite
a
striking.
friend that needs intervention because we're apparently facing civilizational erasure and they need to help us out of it. But Prime Minister Plenković, obviously you sit at the different end of Europe from Belgium. From your point of view in Croatia, I think you were the last enlargement, the last most recent member of the EU. Do you think enlargement is still something that the EU should be looking at as a way of strengthening itself?
Absolutely. We are certainly the last member of the European Union, but it was already 13 years ago. We joined NATO in 2009, and that's why, for us, when after the Bucharest NATO summit at the time, President Bush came to Croatia and at the San Marcos Square in front of the government and parliament, he said, "No one will ever take your freedom away." For a country that had occupied territories to 27% at a certain point, which was the biggest percentage Ukraine had in 2022, that was an important message of stability and assurance of peace. That's why for us, keeping the transatlantic relationship is important. It's something that is embedded in our way of thinking, how we see democracy in the West. And I'm sure the similar logic also is in Lithuania. What I would like to say here, how does it look when it comes to the enlargement? I think we are at the point where we might change the optics. So far, the optics of the enlargement was every country fulfilling the criteria, whether it's political, economic, rule of law, on its own merits. Now, if the part of the deal for the peace deal in Ukraine will be a faster pace for Ukraine towards the European Union, that may completely alter the approach, and it will be an entirely geopolitical approach to the enlargement, which then opens the space for the countries of Southeast Europe, our neighbors, the Western Balkan countries. And for us, it is strategically important that while strongly supporting Ukrainian efforts, we would like to see that the countries also in our neighborhood, especially Bosnia and Herzegovina, take this chance and be looked at in a more favorable way than it was so far. So this debate will be, I would say, struck by the absorption capacity of the European Union, something we rarely talk about, but these are two elements which are critical. One is how we actually take the decisions, because making decisions at 6, 9, 12, 15, 25, 27, or 28, and now back to 27, it's one thing. Making them at, let's say, 35, 36, it's even a little bit more complex. And then the budgetary implications, because a number of us are still so-called friends of cohesion, meaning that we are on the recipient side when it comes to the distributionary power of the EU budget. That means we pay less as a contribution than we would actually receive in order to get to the level playing field. That is the logic of the European solidarity through cohesion, agriculture, or budgetary policies. So with Ukrainian membership, things will change. The country is so
Do you think
big.
you'll become a net contributor?
I don't know. There aren't really that precise calculations yet, but it will certainly have a big impact on everyone, and that is something that will be taken into account. So I think that in parallel with the ongoing negotiations on the next multi-annual financial framework 28-34, we should take a fresh look on what will happen with the enlargement of the Union. I think this is the global moment where the European Union should be stronger, both in terms of industry, in terms of competitiveness, in terms of the AI, and most of all, defense and security. And in that context, enlargement should not be neglected. I think we should fill in the sort of grey holes that are there and that are literally within the body of the European Union, that is the Southeast Europe today. And that's why our policy was always in favor of the enlargement, but I think we need a serious open debate and a fresh look on what is going to happen in the few years ahead of us.
Okay, well, we've had a great discussion. There's about 6 minutes left. I'm sorry, I meant to leave at least 10 for questions, but, you know. Does anybody want to ask a question if there are microphones around? Is there a hand? Do I see a hand? Yeah, in the front row here. One second.
Hi, everybody. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, leader of the democratic process of Belarus. My question is, I hear the voices that we need to lift sanctions from Russia or Belarus or engage with the dictators. I really appreciate the policy of Lithuania and President Nausėda and hear your strong position. What are the opinions? You know, I'm really skeptical about this, but will it help?
Okay, perhaps for you.
What was the question?
So the leader of the Belarusian opposition saying she's worried.
There are voices that we should engage with dictators or lift sanctions from Russia or Belarusian regime.
Do you think? Okay, I mean, just to add a nuance to that, some people say, look, the Americans are talking to the Russians. Maybe the Europeans should talk to the Russians as well. What do you think?
Americans are talking with Belarusians.
Yeah.
They are talking with Belarusians, Belarus releases some political prisoners, at the same time throws new prisoners into the prisons. But the question was about our unity regarding this issue too, because there are some discussions about how hard we should approach Belarus, how consistent and decisive we have to be in front of Belarus, and I think we have to apply the same policies as against Russia, because, as I mentioned, and not only that, Belarus is deploying the Oreshnik systems, Belarus is deploying tactical nuclear weapons, building, or at least there are the plans to build new nuclear reactors additionally by violating all the safety rules and standards. So this is really the matter of concern, especially taking into account that this current regime has consolidated itself. This is a problem not for next 1 or 2 years. It might be the problem for next 10 years.
Prime Minister Wever, I saw you wanted to say something.
Well, negotiate with Putin, I think, is not a very good idea, because as the Americans said, if you want to speak, speak softly, but carry a big stick. We don't have a big stick. We can only speak softly. And that is, for the moment, that's our problem. With soft speech, you're not going to convince Belarus, you're not going to convince Putin. You're the real elected leader of Belarus. And if you talk about enlargement, this is our power. It's Europe wants to be, people want to join the European Union.
Yes.
Nobody wants to join China. Nobody, no neighbor of the United States says, well, we want to join the United States. Nobody wants to. They want to join the European Union just because we have respect. We have the rule of law. We do speak softly. But it is an important debate, because the enlargement will, of course, test the absorption of the United States of Europe, I wanted to say. But
give it a couple of years.
Just at the moment where we need deep integration, to get the big stick, the enlargement debates is contradictory to that. And maybe we should do both, create Europes at different speeds, because I do want to enlarge, and I do hope that one day we can have you join as the real leader of Belarus in the European family and speak softly amongst ourselves. Would be great.
Actually, I'll just take it, and then I'll come to you. There's a question over there, just one more.
Sorry, I take the floor from the Prime Minister. My name is Michael Murray, and I represent, frankly speaking, Ukraine. We are vice president for MHP company. We are the biggest producer of poultry in Europe. First of all, from Ukraine...
Keep it short, because we've only got 2 minutes.
From Ukrainians, we would like to thank you for all these words of support and for your clear standing for Ukraine, for independence, and for your clear understanding what is the good and what is bad. And this is very important. I will be very short, because I wanted to ask about the question about our integration, boosting integration to you, and it's very great that you mentioned it first. But one point I would like to mention in this that maybe, what do you think? Maybe Europe needs more clarity, more strategy regarding how you will perceive, how you see Ukrainian potential to strengthen strategic autonomy of...
Okay, I'm going to have to cut you off there, though you won't get an answer. Yeah. Prime Minister Plenković, why don't you answer that, because you wanted to add to some of the other stuff.
If I may just relate a little bit to what
Madam
Tikhanovskaya said, because she mentioned the issue of the sanctions. I think we need to be very clear on what Kremlin is doing. The dialogue between the United States and Russia on Ukraine is the way to, first of all, restore the relations between Moscow and Washington, Secondly, to be in the position to get gradually rid of various restrictive measures or sanctions regime, whether it's European, American, or somebody else's, or UK's. And third, seek the full rehabilitation at the international scene. These are the three steps which are crystal clear. Everything that has been happening over the last few months in the context of negotiations is going into that direction. And what we have seen, despite all the packages of sanctions, which did have an impact on Russian economy, and I'm sure everything is even probably more complicated than Gitanas suggested, we didn't see the reflection on the political line, nor the political context, nor the strengthening of the opposition, no weakening of the regime, no change of the course. This is the specificity that we are dealing in. That's where the problem is. That's why the United States are in this context with the new second Trump administration in the position to talk, because they talk actually differently than what the rest of us talk in the context of the European Union. They have given themselves a maneuvering space. When it comes to the question of Ukraine, Ukraine actually has a lot to give to Europe when it comes to security and defense. Basically, Ukrainian military today is the only one that has been in such a test of war and defense that nobody else has done that on such a large scale. We are a small country. We had a problem 30 years ago, but it's almost uncomparable to what Ukraine has endured, suffered, and actually resisted so strongly in order to diminish the percentage of the currently occupied territories and illegally annexed from 27 to 19.5, which I suggested to President Zelensky, never give a drop of an ink to something that may be giving away territories de jure.
May I very shortly...
I'm afraid I think we're out of time and they're going to throw us out of the room, but just it's 2 sentences and then I'll wrap it up.
I am in favor of setting a very clear date of the membership for Ukraine and European Union, not as a legally binding, but as a political ambition. And I represent this idea in all the European Council meetings, and I hope that there will be more colleagues supporting this idea. This would be great contribution to the strategic autonomy you mentioned too.
Gabe, that's a very good thought, a concrete proposal on which to end this session. So thank you very much to the panel and thanks to the audience.